You know, I'm a judge here. I got to take out the trash at home. You know what I mean? So I did nothing but work. So I hope your time was better than mine. People may call the next witness.
Thank you. People call Officer Efren Gutierrez.
Do we have an issue?
The testimony you may give and the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat in the witness stand.
Thank you.
Yes, so you may have to go on mode. Turn the switch off. Excuse me a second. Detective state and spell your first and last name, please.
Sure. Efren Gutierrez. First name is E-F-R-E-N. Gutierrez is G-U-T-I-E-R-R-E-Z.
You may proceed.
Thank you. What do you do for a living?
I'm a police detective for the city of Los Angeles, currently assigned to Mission Division detectives.
What division, I'm sorry?
Mission.
Is that an area of Los Angeles then?
Yes, it's one of the stations.
Okay, and that's with LAPD?
Correct.
And how long have you been a peace officer?
30 years.
Back in January of 2017, what was your assignment?
I was assigned to Operations Valley Bureau Homicide.
And what does that entail?
It's the bureau level homicide unit, which covers the San Fernando Valley, all the LAPD jurisdiction in the San Fernando Valley.
Did you then respond to 5012 Queen Victoria in Woodland Hills regarding a killing that occurred there?
Yes, I did.
Okay, what time did you get there?
Just before 7, about 6:45 p.m.
Up on the screen is what's previously been marked as People's 9, page 9. Is that the location where you responded?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so when you got there then, what was your responsibility?
So I arrived there and waited for the rest of the homicide squad that was on call. Once they arrived, I did a walkthrough of the crime scene, which included the interior of the house and the backyard, and basically a preliminary viewing of the scene.
And in that preliminary viewing, what did you notice as far as the crime scene?
So I recall seeing bloodstain evidence on the kitchen floor near a slider. The decedent was an adult male in the patio, kind of in a crouch position. There's some wet blood on the ground. Also, I recall seeing, I believe it was a master bedroom, appeared to have been ransacked. There was clothes on the ground and dresser drawers were open.
when you did this initial walkthrough, are you meeting with any of the detectives there?
Yes, as I said, the homicide on-call squad was there. I did a walkthrough with Detective Gene Parshall. He was going to be the lead investigator on the case. And Rob Flirday, Ryan Verna, and Gabe Bucknell.
Now, do you recognize the person sitting over here in the blue blazer with the long dark hair, the female? Do you recognize her?
Yes.
How do you recognize her?
I recall doing a walkthrough with her and Detective Parshall at the termination of the crime scene investigation.
Thank you. So, is that a typical scenario where you walk through the residence with someone that lives there? Can you explain why you did that?
So it's standard operating procedure with the LAPD. If a search warrant is served at a location, whoever has control or the owner of a specific location, whether it's a house or a business, we take before photos and after photos, and then do a walkthrough with whomever's going to remain or be in control of the location once the police depart, and basically describe what we did as far as our investigation and whether or not we seized any items.
So, did you spend a fair amount of time with the defendant then going to the different rooms and showing her items that were recovered?
Probably about 15 minutes tops.
Okay. Did you talk to her during this time?
I don't think I said anything to her directly.
Okay. So, while you were with the defendant, was anybody else with you when you walked through this house?
Detective Parshall was.
Okay. Did you notice anything unusual about the defendant?
Yes, so my understanding it was the wife of the decedent. She wasn't crying, no tears, there was no runny nose. Seemed kind of odd. That didn't look like someone that was grieving.
Have you conducted homicide investigations before where you've had to interact with family members, loved ones, something of that nature?
Yes, so I worked homicide for 18 years. During that time, I personally handled 108 homicide cases, and then additional probably 300, give or take, undetermined or unnatural death scenes. So yeah, I interact with family grieving at these type of calls.
And this particular scenario, the defendant struck you as unusual?
Yes, I mean, I'm well aware that people grieve differently, but I thought her behavior seemed odd, a little forced. And I recall telling Detective Parshall that I said she's full of crap when we walked out of the house.
Okay, thank you. I have no more questions.
Detective Gutierrez, how long did you arrive at the scene after the murder had taken place? As far as you know?
Yes.
How long after?
I think it had been a couple hours. The scene had already been secured, so I arrived right around 6:45 p.m.
And when was it that you saw the defendant?
It was the next morning, so now it would have been the 24th at around 9 a.m.
That's the first time you saw her?
Yes.
Did you talk to anyone at the scene the night before about what her condition was, her mental condition, emotional condition, and so forth?
No.
So this is the first observation you had of her was the next morning after the murder. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's when you observed what you said you thought was kind of unusual.
Yes.
And you told that to Detective Parshall?
Yes.
And you wrote a report?
No.
Did you prepare a report of your investigation or conduct at the scene?
No, the scene was processed by the criminalist, so I did not prepare a report.
Did you prepare anything, any written report or any written notes in a pawn file, anything like that, documenting what you had done?
No, the only documentation of my actions would have been in the chronologue, and whether or not I wrote it or Detective Parshall wrote it. He was the lead investigator for a few days before it was transferred to a different entity within the LAPD.
So either you or Detective Parshall, you said, prepared the chron file?
The chronological log.
And tell us what a chronological log
It's a synopsis of the investigative process. Sometimes it documents follow-up information, people that are interviewed, and requests, things of that nature.
It's supposed to document a summary of the conduct of the officers who took part in an investigation or search of a crime scene or whatever you did at the crime scene. So is that correct?
It's written in brevity form, so small snippets of information, yes.
Okay. And did you have any input in the con file for the time that you were at the scene?
I may have, I don't recall though.
Could I approach Your Honor? And
Yeah, you can approach it.
I'm showing you what appears to be a con file. It's got some highlights. You can ignore those, but I think,
Is this the chronological log?
yes.
Okay.
If you could just look at it to yourself, and is that the chronological log that was prepared throughout the case, but specifically has entries for the night that or morning that you were there at the scene?
Yes, just a few pages if you don't mind.
No, sure.
Okay, yes, it does appear to be the chronological log, although I don't see any entries that I made personally.
Well, your name is mentioned in some of the sections of the log. Is that not correct?
That is correct, but when I make the entry throughout the 18 years in homicide, I put my name at the bottom of the entry in black and bold, so I don't see any of those entries.
Okay, so you didn't personally write on the log. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
But when it says Detective Gutierrez and Bucknell evaluated the crime scene, when it says Detectives Gutierrez and Bucknell evaluated the crime scene, where does that information come from?
The entries are typically written by the lead investigator, but the chronological log, is maintained in a server that all homicide detectives have access to. So if a detective from another squad were to receive some kind of investigative information, they can access that chronological log and make an entry.
I understand, but your name is mentioned several times in the chron log, is it not?
Yes, as expected, yes.
And it describes conduct that you conducted or engaged in on the date that the chron log listed. Is that right?
That's correct.
How does that information get into the chron log if you didn't write it?
It's probably written or entered by Detective Parshall.
Who was the lead detective?
Yes.
And is it normal procedure that you would tell Detective Parshall what you did of any import, and then it was his job to include it in the chron log?
It can go either way. I could have entered it, or he, acting as the lead investigator, could have entered it. There's no set rule.
Well, how would he know what you did, what to enter that you did?
Well, he was there with me.
Okay. So either he saw you or you told him. Is that correct?
Correct.
So there are entries, for instance, that you and Bucknell searched the residence for additional evidence. Was that correct?
Yes.
It says victim's stolen Porsche was placed in the stolen vehicle system and a broadcast was done regarding the incident. That's in there, correct?
That would be hearsay, sustained.
Okay. It says Gutierrez interviewed the house cleaner Delia Rivera, is that right?
Counsel, you're going to go through everything that has Gutierrez's name in it, then it is hearsay, sustained.
I'm just asking if he did it. I'm not asking what the contents are.
You can show it to him then and say, did he do it?
Okay. the entry here, if you could just look at it yourself with your name at the top and tell me if that accurately describes one of the things you did at the scene at the time that you were there.
Okay, I read it.
And does that accurately describe what you did, one of the things you did that night?
So yes, Detective Parcell interviewed her. I translated Spanish for him.
Okay. And then the results were documented in the Cron, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, anywhere in the Cron, can you look, does it say that you met with or had any contact with Monica Sementilli?
No, I don't see an entry.
Yet you testified that you had a walk through with her, walk through the house, is that correct?
Yes.
So whose job was it or role was it to document that in the Cron file?
It would have been Detective Parcell's.
And it was not in there, it's not in there, correct?
Correct.
And is there anything in there that indicates that you thought it was unusual that Mrs. Sementilli was not crying or anything about the way she acted emotionally or how she looked? Anything in there about that?
No.
Did you think that was important?
In hindsight, of course.
In hindsight, because the prosecution said they were going to ask you about that?
No, in hindsight, as the case progressed, I understand that
Well, we don't want to know what you understand. That would be hearsay, but
Full objection. Didn't finish his answer.
when I learned throughout the course of the investigation in the following days that Ms. Sementilli was the focus of the investigation as being potentially involved.
so you learned in subsequent days that she was the focus of the investigation. Is that right?
Yes.
And can you tell us approximately when that was in relation to the day you were first at the scene?
A couple days.
A couple days later, she was the focus.
Yes.
And when you learned that she was the focus, did you tell anyone that you had relevant information about how she acted or looked at the day you saw her, the morning after the murder?
No, the only conversation I had about her behavior was with Detective Parcell as we were leaving the scene.
All right. So you told him.
Yes.
And do you know if he documented it anywhere?
I don't know.
And a few days later, when you heard she was the focus of the investigation, did you document it anywhere in a police report?
No.
Have you seen it documented in any police report at all that was prepared during the years that this case has been pending and now before this trial? Have you seen it anywhere documented?
No, I wouldn't have access to that. My involvement in the investigation was the crime scene, the interview with Miss Rivera, and that's.
Did you tell anyone other than Detective Parcell about your observation?
Yes.
Who?
Miss Silverman.
And when was the first time you told Miss Silverman?
During a pre-trial meeting with her, some kind of prep. I can't remember, over a year ago, I believe.
So about a year ago?
Maybe longer.
2 years ago?
I don't recall, sir.
Well, you know this case has been pending 7 years.
I am aware of that, yes.
So it was several years after you were first at the scene that you first met with Miss Silverman, is that right?
Yes.
And how did that come up? How Monica Sementilli reacted the morning after the murder?
It was during a meeting with Ms. Silverman that discussed, what my involvement in the crime scene was.
And how did the no tears come up?
I brought it up.
You brought it up?
Yes.
Okay, was was documented anywhere?
Probably, but I can still remember, but I don't know for sure.
Have you been shown any documentation to refresh your memory?
No.
Is this the first time you've testified about this in court on this case?
I believe so, yes.
You didn't testify before the grand jury.
I don't remember, sir, actually.
Okay. And by the way, you don't know how she was acting emotionally the night before or the night of the murder, do you?
No, I don't.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Anything further about other people?
Yes, just briefly. Detective, so when you, back in January, you went to the scene, your role was to do this walkthrough with one of the detectives, right?
Correct.
And you weren't a lead detective on it, it wasn't your case, is that right?
That's correct.
And so, but after having investigated well over 100 homicides and being experienced, this one struck you as different, is what you're testifying to, because of the lack of what you deem no emotion, no tears, right?
Yes,
Okay, 7, 8 years later now, we're in court. Do you still remember that?
I do.
And does that stick out as different, even from that day forward, of the continuing investigations you've done of an unusual reaction from a victim?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further about the defense?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Detective Gutierrez. You're excused.